Cicero's De Amicitia is a philosophical written work that discusses the topic of friendship. I chose two passages from De Amicitia, one which describes the definition of friendship and the other which describes the advantages and benefits of friendship. I really enjoyed reading Cicero's De Amicitia because it just had such a different feeling to it than the only other work of his which I've read, the Catilinarian Oration. In his speech against Catiline, Cicero obviously has to use a lot more forceful vocabulary, and it has negative underlying tones to the entire speech just because he's trying to convince an entire room of people that Catiline is a threat to the entire country. But in De Amicitia, there's just a lot more of a positive feel to the entire work because Cicero is talking about how important friendship is and how it is just one of the best gifts given to mankind and how people's lives are fulfilled through friendship. So the positive spin made it very enjoyable to read and a lot different from what I'm used to. Even though the pieces had entirely different feels, Cicero does use a lot of the same grammatical and stylistic devices that he employed in Catilinarian orations as well. So that was also something I enjoyed because while the feel of the piece is different, it's still obviously Cicero's writing. Another thing I enjoyed about reading this piece is that it made me just think about friendship in general. Am I a good friend? Things like, do I have that true and genuine friendship with someone where I would sacrifice anything for them? And then it also made me think about Cicero's personal life. Is he saying these things because he really desires this true and genuine friendship? Or is he saying these things because he does have a true and genuine friendship to base all of these philosophical key points off of? So thinking these things throughout De Amicitia made translating this passage very enjoyable. Est enim amicitia nihil aliud nisi omnium divinarum humanarum quae rerum cum benevolentia et caritate consensio. Qua quidum hod scio an accepta sapienta nihil melius homini sit adis immortalibus datum. Divitias ali praeponunt, bonum ali valetudinem, ali potentiam, ali honores, multi etiam voluptates. Belluarum hoc quidem extremum, illa autem superiora caduca et incerta posita non tam in consolis nostris quam in fortunae temeritate. Qui autem in virtute summum bonum ponunt, praeclare illi quidem, sed haec ipsa virtus amicitiam et gignit et continet, nec sine virtute amicitia esse ullo pacto potest. Iam virtutem ex consuetudine vitae sermonisque nostri interpretermur, nec eam et quidam docti, verborum magnificentia metiomur virosque bonos eos, qui habentur numeremus polos catones Gallos Scipiones Philos, his communis vita catenta est, eos autem omitamus qui omnino nusquam reperiuntur. Talis igitur inter viros amicitia tantas opportunitates habet quantas vix quae dicere. Principio qui potest esse vita vitalis ut ait ennius, quae non in amici mutua benevolentia conquiescit, quid dulcius quam habere quicum omnia audeas sic loqui ut tecum. Qui esset tantus fructus in prosperis rebus, nisi haberes, qui illis aeque actu ipse quaderet? Adversas vero fere difficile esset sine eo qui illas gravius etiam quam tu feret. Denique ceterae res quae expentuntur opportunae sunt singulae rebus fere singulis divitae ut utare opes ut colare honores ut laudere voluptates ut guardeas valetudo ut dolore careas et muneribus fungare corporis. Amicitia res plurimas continet, quoque te verteris praesto est, nulla loco excluditur, numquam intempestiva, numquam molesta est, itaque non aqua non igni utaiunt, loquis pluribus utimur quam amicitia, neque ego nunc de vulgari aut de mediocri, quae tamen ipsa et delectat et prodest, sed de vera et perfecta loquor, qualis eorum qui pauci nominantur fuit. Nam et secundas res splendidores facit amicitia et adversas partiens communicansque leviores. Quumque plurimas et maximas commoditates amicitia conteneat, tum illa nimirum praestat omnibus, quod bonum spem praelucet imposterum nec debilitari animos aut cadere patitur, verum enim amicum qui inteutor, tamquam exemplar aliquod inteutor sui. Quo querca et absentis adsunt, et agentes abundant, et imbecilli valent, et quod difficilius dictu est, mortui vivunt. Tantus eos honos memoria desiderium prosequitur amicorum. Ex quo illorum beata mors videtur, horum vita laudebilis. Quod si ex emeris ex rerum natura benevolentiae coniunctionem, nec domus ulla nec urbs stare poterit, ne agri quidem cultus permanebit, id si minus intelligitur quanta vis amicitiae concordiae quae sit, ex dissensionibus atque ex discordis percipi potest, quae enim domus tam stabilis, quae tam firma civitas est, quae non audis et discidis funditus posset averti. Ex quo quantum boni sit in amicitia iudicare potest. Agri gentinum quidem doctum quendam virum carminibus Graecis vaticinatum fuerunt, quae in rerum natura totoque mundo constarent quaeque morerentur, ea contrahere amicitiam dissipare discordiam. Aque hoc quidem omnes mortales et intelligunt et reprobant. Itaque si quando aliquad officium extitit amici in periculis aut auduendis aut communicandis, quis est qui id non maximis efferat laudibus, qui clamores toto cavea nuper in hospitis et amici mea marci pacui nova fabula, cum ignorante rege uter Orestes esset, Pylades Orestem se esse diceret, ut pro illo necaretur. Orestes autem ita ut erat. Orestem se esse perseveraret, stantes plaudebant in re ficta, quid arbitramur in vera facturos fuisse, facili indicabat ipsa natura vim suam, cum homines, quod facere ipsi non possent, id recta fiere in altero iudecarent. This is a summarization of De Amicitia by Cicero. Here are a list of the key points that Cicero makes during the passage I chose to translate. The first point that Cicero makes is that friendship is one of the best things on earth. Cicero considers friendship to be one of the best gifts given to men by the gods. There are many other gifts given by the gods, like riches, health, power, honor, and of course pleasure, but friendship is by far the best. One of the reasons that friendship is the best gift is because it is a situation we can control. Many of the other gifts I previously mentioned are mainly determined by fate and good luck, but we are able to choose our friends, making it the best gift. Cicero then goes on to state that men with virtue are desired friends. People look highly on them. Virtue is a trait that is needed in friendship in order for it to even exist. When you are friends with great people, you are provided with great opportunities. Cicero then poses a question: what is life if you do not have friends? Friends reciprocate kindness, and you can talk with them openly about nearly anything, just as if you were talking to yourself. They celebrate the good things that happen in your life as if they were their own, and they share your burdens and hard times as if they were their own as well. So through hardships and the good things that happen, they are there for you to support you and help you out. The next key point that Cicero makes is that friendship has many advantages, whereas the other pleasures in life mainly just have one. Riches are only good because you can spend them, health is only good because you are not weak, and power is only good because you are honored, and honor is only good because you are praised. With friendship, however, even if you turn away from it, it still waits for you, and it is always present. Friendship never becomes tiresome or is a burden, and it's just something that is always enjoyed. Cicero goes on to describe the idea of a perfect and genuine friendship. This is a friendship where the friends help each other prosper through life and just make life more exciting for each other. They help each other through hardships with caring support, and they never consider helping a friend to be burdensome. Friends bring each other hope and keep each other's spirits up, even during the darkest of times. They admire their friend and see their friend as if they were an example of his or her own character. Cicero states that friendship is always wholesome. Even when friends are absent, they are present. Even when they are poor, they give everything. Even when they are weak, they are strong. And even when they are dead, they live on in memory. Kindness is the basis of friendship because it overcomes disagreements. You can see the power of friendship when you think about how houses and cities have been overthrown by hatred and disagreements. However, this does not happen as often with friendship because friendship powers through these things. The last point that Cicero makes has to do with a play written by one of his friends. In the play, a king was about to kill Orestes. Since the king did not know which man was Orestes, Orestes' friend, Pylades, declared that he was Orestes, so that he would be killed in place of his friend. At the same time, Orestes attempted to convince the king that he was truly the real Orestes, so that Pylades would not be killed. This was a display of true friendship, where both men were willing to sacrifice their own life to save the other. At this play, people applauded the scene with a standing ovation. Even if they would not sacrifice themselves for a friend, they recognized this display of true, genuine friendship, because true friendship is something all of humanity desires in life. There were a few complex grammatical issues I had to be careful of when translating the passage. One of these was case usage. For example, the sentence stantes plaudebant in re ficta has the uncommon ablative preposition in, meaning in regards to. Usually when I see the word in, I tend to translate it as in, on, into, onto, depending on whether or not the noun is a nominative noun or an accusative noun. I've noticed that in Cicero's works he does tend to use the preposition in, meaning in regards to, more so than I've seen in other places. For the sentence, I chose to translate it as, the standing people applauded in regards to the fictional matter. When determining case usage and proper translation for the sentence, it's important to just look at the surrounding sentences and the context of the passage as a whole, so you can make an educated decision on what the best translation would be. Going along with this, I had some issues picking the best meaning for translation. At times this could be tricky. For example, the sentence qui esset tantus fructus in prosperibus rebus contains the word fructus. Fructus is a very versatile word and it can mean many different things. Some of its meanings are produce, crops, fruit, profit, enjoyment. For this sentence, I had to look at the surrounding sentences in the context of the passage in order to pick the best meaning. I chose to translate this sentence as, how could there be such great enjoyment in prosperous matters? Another issue with grammar I came across was distinguishing between relative clauses, whether they would be connecting relative clauses, adjectival relatives, noun relatives, or relative clauses of characteristic. Cicero really likes to use a lot of relative clauses, so it's important to be able to have a mental checklist of what distinguishes one clause from the next so you can properly translate the passage and convey the meaning that Cicero intends. So for connecting relatives, I know that qui, quae, quod starts a new sentence or follows a semicolon. The antecedent is in the previous sentence. When translating connecting relatives, you usually translate them as et plus hic haec hoc. So and this or and those, and the hic haec hoc just depends on the gender of the antecedent. For adjectival relative clauses and relative clauses of characteristic, the noun has to be the subject or the direct object in the dependent clause. The difference between the two is that adjectival relative clauses need to have the verb in the indicative form. If the verb is in the subjunctive form, it is a relative clause of characteristic. This is because the subjunctive form makes the antecedent indefinite and it sort of generalizes the sense of the clause. So there is a difference between adjectival relative clauses and relative clauses of characteristic. For noun relative clauses, I would look for nouns that are the subject or direct object in the dependent clause, but also the subject or direct object in the main clause as well. And that would be what distinguishes a noun relative from the other relative clauses. When looking at the stylistic devices that were present in Cicero's work, I focused mainly on the rhythmical clausulas that were in the text. When we were learning about rhythmical clausulas in class, I had a little bit of trouble understanding the concept, so I really wanted to delve into the clausulas that were represented in Cicero's work in order to gain a better understanding. So the first sentence I picked out was Quae non in amici mutua benevolentia conquiescat. You can see that there is an Asiatic ditrochi clausula at the end represented by the long short ending. Cicero used these a lot to rhythmically close his sentences with a very definite sound, and it had a large impact on the audiences he spoke to. So these rhythmical clausulas played a big part in making Cicero's speeches and written works successful because with these type of endings there was a larger impact. Another thing that should be noted about this sentence is that lighter and shorter words come first and they lead up to longer and heavier words. If we look specifically at the words in this sentence, you can see that quae non in amici are four shorter words. They're lighter and they roll off the tongue a lot easier. But following these four shorter words, you have mutua benevolentia conquiescat. These words are longer, have more syllables, and just seem a little bit heavier when you speak them aloud. So through this technique, Cicero is intensifying his sentence to indicate that the end of it is coming. As you read it, the longer words create a larger impact to the ending of the sentence itself. The next sentence I looked at was Quae anim domus tam stabilis quae tam firma civitas est, quae non odis et discidis funditus possit averti. Once again, there's another Asiatic Ditrochi clausula at the end, indicated again by the long, short ending. And there is also anaphora with the word quae, which is repeated 3 times, each at the beginning of the indirect question. One thing to note is that these short rhetorical questions, the first two, quae anim domus tam stabilis and quae tam firma civitas est, are shorter, and they help build up to the longer indirect question, which is quae non odis et discidis funditus possit averti. So by building up to a longer indirect question, once again this indicates the end of the sentence, also in addition to the clausula. So these strategies combined help create a very intense ending that Cicero's audience loved. You can see the two techniques he used through these two sentences. Sometimes he uses the length of the words to help build up the sentence, and sometimes he uses the length of the clauses to help build up the sentence. Here's a periodic sentence that is present in the passage that I translated by Cicero. The sentence reads, Agrigentinum quidem doctum, quendam virum carminibus Graecis vaticinatum, fuerunt, quae in rerum natura totoque mundo consterent, quaeque moreruntur, ea contrahere amicitiam dissipare discordiam. So there's a lot of breakup in this sentence, and first we need to find the main clause. The main clause is introduced by quidem doctum. So this reads, indeed, it has been shown, assuming there's an omitted essay here, and this introduces an indirect statement, which brings us to quendam virum agrigentinum. So, indeed, it has been shown that a certain man of agrigentinum, and then we have a participial clause here that modifies virum, describing the man, a characteristic of the man. So, a certain man of agrigentinum, having talked wildly in Greek poems, and then back to the indirect statement, fuerunt, this can be translated as speaks. So this is part of the indirect statement, but it also introduces another indirect statement. So this man speaks that these things, ea is the accusative subject of this indirect statement, speaks that these things, and then we come here to a relative clause of characteristic that modifies ea, which exist in the nature of things and the entire world. And then we have another relative clause of characteristic which modifies natura and mundo, which are moving. And then we come back down to the indirect statement. So these things with these relative clause of characteristic unite friendship and scatter disagreement. So going back to look at this, we see that this quae modifies ea, and it's just talking about how these things exist naturally in the world. And then this quae clause right here that talks about how they are moving is saying that things in nature and in the world are constantly changing and everything is in fluctuation. If we look at this sentence in the context of what Cicero was talking about during the passage, he's just trying to say that this man was talking about how disagreements in friendship occur naturally in nature. Because nature is always changing and moving, these things just sort of happen. But he is saying that friendship, despite certain disagreements, is always going to be united, and friendship is able to scatter these disagreements in order to maintain that friendship. So this sentence is considered a periodic sentence because although we have the main clause right here that's fairly early on in the sentence, when we get to this indirect statement, we don't really find out what this certain man is talking about until we get down to ea, which is the subject of the indirect statement. So we have these two relative clauses of characteristic that are present before we even get to our subject, and then we have the two verbs, which talk about what is actually happening and what this man is speaking about. So the full translation of this sentence altogether is, "Indeed it has been shown that a certain man of Agrigentinum, having talked wildly in Greek poems, speaks that these things, which exist in the nature of things and in the world, which are moving, unite friendship and scatter disagreement." Here we have another periodic sentence that was present in the passage I translated by Cicero. This sentence is in reference to how the men in the audience reacted when they saw the play that was written by Cicero's friend. This play was the one that showed Pylades sacrificing his life in order to save his friend Orestes. So the sentence reads as facile indicabat ipsa natura vim suam, cum homines quod facere ipsi non possent, id recte fieri in altero jaducerent. Once again, we have the main clause, similar to the last periodic sentence, laid out right in the first part of the sentence, so that part is very apparent. But when we get to the circumstance cum clause, we do not have the verb until the very end. So we have to read through the causal quad clause and the indirect statement until we get to the verb of the cum clause for this section of the periodic sentence to make any sense. So I believe that although the main verb is not part of the periodic sentence, the cum clause and the clauses that are contained within it create a periodic sentence in this part of Cicero's work. So when we are looking at the sentence, this first part translates as, "Nature showed her power easily when men, because they were not able to do this same thing," and then we come down to this, the judicerent, which introduces an indirect statement, "judged that that action that was performed by Pylades to save his friend Orestes," that's what this id is referring to, so that action was done with virtue in another man. So obviously jaducerent introduces this indirect statement. This is one of those verbs that typically does that in a sentence. This quad clause I determined was a causal quad clause because it does not serve as a subject or a direct object in this sentence. And when you think about the context of the situation the sentence is in, it makes sense for this to be a causal quad clause. Because these men who just saw this play, they judged that this action that Pylades performed to save Orestes was so great and done with such virtue and was just such a great display of friendship, partially because they knew that they may not be able to do this same thing themselves. They understand that maybe they may not be able to sacrifice themselves for a friend, but it's so admirable to see that trait in another man that they judged it with virtue. So that's why I believe this quad to be a causal quad clause and not any sort of relative clause. So if we want to translate this sentence completely, a literal translation would be, nature easily showed her power when men, because they were not able to do this same thing, judged that that was done with virtue in another man.